it's a long time since you set off. We've kept up to date with you with various stories along the way. Just remind us of the reasons behind this trip.
Yes, well, of course. Well, we did it because the people in Gaza, of whom there are 1.5 million, a lot of people, had been under a siege imposed by Israel nearly 2 years ago now, and they've been gradually tightening that siege. And we wanted to bring some relief to the people of Gaza and show them that they were not forgotten at this time when they feel, as they do, so cut off from people. So it had a mission, bring some help to them, but also show them by going to them that they were, as they say, not alone.
And what you took to them was medical aid, wasn't it?
Yes, I'd like to say a big thank you here to the people of York who helped raise the money that we sought to go, which meant that we could buy a second-hand but a fully equipped and in good condition accident and emergency ambulance straight from the health service. We took that all the way and we filled it with as much as possible in the way of medical supplies and also some limited amount of education and other material for children as well. So we took a lot of stuff with us in the ambulance. When we got to Gaza, we had arranged for it to be given to some quite specific hospital groups who we knew would put it to very good use. We didn't just hand it over. We very carefully ensured that it was going to, for example, the vice president of the Red Crescent in Gaza, who is a friend of one of our members of the team. They helped us get the vehicles unloaded and delivered to the right people. So I think we did do something useful, though, of course, in one sense, it's a drop in the ocean.
You obviously probably were very, very aware of the challenges which would face you trying to get to Gaza and actually trying to get into Gaza because you were going in from Egypt.
Yes.
Did you really think that it was going to be as bad as it was? Because there were a few hairy moments.
There were. Well, we knew it wasn't going to be easy, as you rightly say, Ali. That's why, of course, as I said, it's a siege. And by definition, that means it's not easy. We were very pleased in some places. I mean, we got wonderful support throughout from the Turkish authorities, and I really would like to pay a great tribute to them because, frankly, without the help of the Turkish government and the Turkish charity groups, in particular a group called İHA, we wouldn't have done it. But when we got to Jordan, the Jordanians were not so helpful, although they did let us travel through Jordan. And we got down to Aqaba, which some of your more historical listeners will know was where Colonel Lawrence, T. Lawrence, had his great victory in the Arab revolt when they took Aqaba from the land. Well, we went down to Aqaba, and unfortunately we didn't have the same success because at that point the Egyptians said, you can't go through Sinai. So, and we stayed some days negotiating, but they were adamant. So in the end, they said, but if you come in from another port on the Sinai Peninsula called El Arish, which is not far from the Gaza area, then you can come in from there. That's a long way from where we were in Aqaba, but we retraced our steps back up through Jordan into Syria, and then we got a ferry to take the ambulances down to the port of Al Arish, and we flew down to El Arish, which is this little port close to Rafah, where the border post is with Gaza. And we flew in there. Now, we had an agreement, a written agreement between the Turkish government and the Egyptian government that if we went into El Arish, then they would allow us access into Rafah and Gaza. But when we got to the airport, the Egyptians, having kept us waiting for quite a while, suddenly said that we'd bought visas to get in. They suddenly said, well, we've stamped your visas with exit visas, so you'll have to leave. And at that point, we were understandably fairly angry, so we had a bit of a demonstration. And after making an awful lot of noise, and I may say destroying the aluminium saucepans that we had with us in making the noise, banging away, after a while they said, OK, we'll take the cancellation off the visas and you can go into Rafah and go into El Arish, and stay in El Arish overnight, and then tomorrow you can pick up your convoy vehicles, which were in the port, you see. So that was it. So having made a fuss, but they were quite difficult, we were allowed to go into El Arish. But we were placed pretty well under arrest. When I got up the next morning, there were 3 armoured vehicles outside the hotel, and we were clearly prevented from going anywhere much. Anyway, after that, we were allowed back down to the port and rejoin the ambulances and the other vehicles. And we were hoping we'd then quickly get away to go to Gaza. But we were then told, after a few hours further delay, that the Egyptians were now saying we could only do this if we handed over 60 vehicles from the convoy and handed them over to the Israeli authorities. Well, as you may imagine, the last thing we were prepared to do was to hand them over to Israel. So there was another demonstration, and really what happened is that escalated into a very nasty potential situation. The riot police arrived in there, more than 1,000, I think, with their shields. And what we couldn't see, but our photographs proved afterwards, was that behind them, sheltering behind 3 rows of riot police, were the Egyptian intelligence service, who were sharpening sticks and collecting rocks in bags. And late in the night, I was actually trying to sleep in the ambulance at the time, this tension, into a nasty incident where a lot of rocks were hurled and a lot of people were injured. And it was a very difficult situation.
Were they worried that you were taking something in that wasn't what you said? Was that part of the problem?
It didn't seem to be. They never went through a further check on that, and we'd have been quite happy to be checked because we were taking humanitarian aid, and that was all. And we didn't want any difficulty there. All we wanted was to get out the port and go to Rafah. But the Egyptians were very difficult, and as I say, in my view, they created the incident that caused injury to about 50 people in the end, 1 or 2 of them quite seriously. And so we were worried that it was going to get worse and they were going to just come in and damage our vehicles. But in the end, it calmed down a bit. Partly, I must say again, the Turks come into this, from the very courageous action that Bülent, the Turkish leader of the group, took by going out at the height of the crisis. He went out alone with an interpreter into the midst of these hundreds of riot police. There was even a tank there at that time, water cannon, everything. And with an interpreter, he negotiated a better deal by which we did give up 50 vehicles, but they were to be under the control of the Turks, who would sell them off, and the money would go to refugee camps. No question of going to Israel. Well, we accepted that. It wasn't what we ideally wanted, but it was a reasonable compromise. So it meant the rest of the convoy was then able to, after a further delay, to move on to the Rafah border. But it could have been very, very nasty. And I must say, there was a bit of a contrast between the way the Turks acted on this and the actions of the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, who were very conspicuous by their absence while we were in difficulty. So anyway, after that,
interesting.
Yes, interesting. We got on. We went to the Rafah border. We were then allowed through without much trouble. I must say, at that point, the Egyptians seemed to accept the situation, and we entered Gaza, and that was a marvellous moment, I can tell you. When we actually delivered the aid, there weren't all the people there, but when we got into Gaza, the ambulance was covered with flowers. They all threw flowers at the ambulance and inside it, and the cab of the ambulance was suddenly full of flowers, and it was marvellous. And the welcome, the sense of, I think, gratitude that we'd come was absolutely overwhelming, and actually was very moving. And I think there's an infamous clip somewhere of me on one of the television channels actually in tears, but I don't regret that. It was a fantastic moment. They were so pleased to see us. It obviously meant a lot to them, very humbling.
Is it something that will stay with you forever, despite all the sort of challenges that you faced? And you probably knew you were going to face those, and there was a lot of, sort of negotiations going on, but you proved that you were willing to negotiate to get the aid there. Is that a moment that, sort of getting into to Gaza, that will stay with you forever?
Yes, in some ways. If others forgive me saying this, it was I think the evening when we drove on through the roads, through hundreds, thousands of cheering people, all ages and so on. In the middle of the night they'd come out. I think in some ways it was the best evening of my life. The the sense of gratitude was overwhelming, and I'd say very humbling. So it was worth all the difficulties. And it was also worth it, Ellie, because we did deliver the ambulance and the aid, as we promised we'd do to the people of York, to people who really needed it. I can assure them their money has been used and is gone to the right sort of causes,
well,
humanitarian. So I do feel very pleased we did that.
I have to say personally, I admire all of you for what you did. So many people would have given up. It was a long journey. You were away from your families at Christmas. And I think, many people listening, no matter what their views are about what's going on, what you actually achieved really was quite remarkable. Thank you very much for finding the time to talk to us. And I know that you are actually going to do a picture gallery for us, for our team online. And we'll let people know when that's there. And the pictures will tell your story. But Mike William, thank you very, very much for popping into the Malton studio this afternoon.
Thank you very much for asking me. Thank you.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.